Hello everyone, thanks for joining us today. This is Brian with CTC, and we are going to be talking about Civil 3D 2017 new features. Some of you guys haven't seen any of these yet. I think there's a couple new ones you guys will be excited about. Depends on what you're doing in the software, certainly, but some significant changes. So as we go through this, we'll take a half hour to go through the presentation. As we go through it, you can submit questions if you'd like. Type them into the system there. I will address them if they're mostly relevant to everyone or they won't take too long. If it's something that I can't get to right away during this presentation, I will respond afterwards. So with that, I think we will get started. So 2017 new features, kind of some basic categories here. Some things helping project management. This is centered around data shortcuts, things like this. Usability. The user friendliness of it has been improved. Corridor modeling, some big enhancements there. Probably some of the biggest ones I'm excited about. And then some new things through collaboration and data exchange with other applications. And before we jump into some of the actual new features, I just want to discuss DWG versions a bit. So the DWG version has not changed, right? So we've had a 2013 version for the last 4 versions. That version is still there for DWGs. So the DWG format has not changed. As most of you know, that does not apply for Civil 3D objects. So those are a different thing. There are new versions for this. What this means is it's not backwards compatible with 16 or 15 or anything like that. So you make a surface, you make a corridor, you make an alignment, you cannot go back and open that in an earlier version. There was, by comparison, backwards compatibility between 2013 and 2016. The exception to that was that you didn't use a new feature, but if you made a basic alignment in 16, you could go and open it in 14. So I don't think this is a huge issue for most because most people don't jump between versions within a single project. You might migrate for a single project at one time, but not going back and forth. So anyway, you should keep that in mind. So if you go and open a project drawing, you save in 17, just kind of wanted to check out what 17 is. That drawing will not go back, so be careful with that. There is a new tool for referencing a styles template or a standards template. So we had the DWS file. That was a standards file for layers and things like that. We now have something similar for Civil 3D styles. And as you can see in the ribbon there, there's now a reference button on the Manage tab, and it allows us to browse and basically X-reference. It's not an X-reference, but it's like that to a standard template. And so this might be a project template. This could be a standard template for the whole company or for your whole organization. It kind of depends, but I'll definitely show you that in the software. And what it does is allow you to, well, it's twofold. You can push styles from a standard template out to project drawings, or it's just general updating of a template. You know, you can do that, and all new drawings from that template, of course, will get those new styles. But what about drawings that are in work or in progress right now? You can also push that stuff out through this as well. It's not an automatic push. There are some checks and balances there. Obviously, it could be pretty kind of catastrophic if you just go and overwrite a dozen alignment styles in someone's drawing without really understanding what's happening there or why they might be different than the standard. So we'll talk about that in more detail. There's what's called surface caching now, and basically what this is if you have a data shortcutted object, or excuse me, a surface, say from an existing survey drawing into a design drawing, if you go and send that design drawing to someone, they won't get that surface. There'll be a broken reference into it in there. And so there's this little option in your command settings that says store referenced surface in drawing. So the default behavior we are used to is that being hard-coded as no. With it now an option to set to yes, what it means is that it'll still be a data shortcut, so it's going to be a single source, but if you go and take that surface and you send it elsewhere, that design drawing, and there's a data ref surface in it, all that surface data will be in there. It'll be noted that there was a source elsewhere, but they'll at least have the TIN data. So it makes sharing your drawings, perhaps it's a contractor, another consultant, whomever it might be, it makes that a little more streamlined. So a little feature there. Probably one of the bigger improvements, data shortcuts for corridors. So this has been a long time coming. And there's not a whole lot to it. It's, when you go into your data shortcuts and you create a data shortcut, you're now going to have a new category for corridors at the bottom. And so this, you will find, in my testing so far, I found it to be more stable than XREFing corridors to then make cross sections. So I found it to be more stable. The other thing, as you know through data shortcuts, is it's not like an XREF where you're just getting basically the whole drawing with all of its styling coming through. With a data shortcut, you get to assign a separate style. So imagine a corridor coming into one drawing and have a different code set style on it than a corridor in another one. It allows for a lot of flexibility, allows you to really kind of take the use of your corridor to something beyond just cross sections. So pretty cool feature there. Data shortcut folders. This is what it sounds like. Make folders in your data shortcuts tree. So how much time do you spend, right-clicking on a data shortcut and tell it to create a reference and then say OK to the default styles, and then you do that 25 more times for all your alignments, or 50 times, or whatever you have in there. Now you can drop sets of alignments or surfaces or what have you into a folder, and then you can actually drag and drop or create a reference to that entire folder of data shortcuts at once. So I'll be sure to show you that in more detail. So it makes data shortcuts and data references just a lot easier to work with, a lot quicker. So cool new feature. Feature lines now have the ability, similar to an alignment, to not be in a site. So if you don't use feature lines much, or if you do and they kind of drive you nuts, one of the big things about them is what site they're in. If you have two feature lines in one site and they cross, they assume the same elevation at that crossing. If you don't want that interaction, what you had to do in the past was to put those feature lines in separate sites. Now if you do, if you just simply select no site or none site for your feature line, they'll behave like independent objects, similarly to two polylines crossing. They won't assume same elevation or anything like that. There is no awareness between one object and the next. So feature lines now have that as well. I think those who use feature lines quite a bit, you're used to sites, and they have a purpose, right? You want that interaction between feature lines sometimes. When it's coming to site grading or parking lot grading, you want to kind of define that grid or kind of network of feature lines, and you want the endpoints of two of them to interact together. But there are many cases where you don't want that, and especially for newer users, the concept of not having to deal with a site is a nice new feature. The pressure networks catalog has been expanded quite a bit. So if you can see that screenshot down there, there are additional materials in there now. And beyond that, there's hydrants, there's gate valves, there's butterfly valves, there's all sorts of stuff in there. I encourage you guys to dive into that. I see more and more firms and organizations moving to pressure networks. I know a lot of people have their pipe networks configured to work for water main and such, but give it a try. Check it out. Pressure networks are getting to the point where they're pretty usable. Still, like pipe networks, it's not like you can jump in and use them out of the box. There's still some configuration there, but a lot of these parts we don't have to build manually by hand. There's quite a bit in there now, so I encourage you guys to check that out. I'm not going to dive in and show you that in the software. It's a big list. You can jump in there and check it out, but you can see the screenshot, the 3D one there. There's some nice detailed gate valves and butterfly valves, so definitely a nice addition. Corridor functionality has improved quite a bit. You can now build a corridor on a feature line. So a corridor baseline can be based on a feature line. This in the past could only be done with an alignment and profile, and while it worked fine for the most part, there's advantages that feature lines have over alignments. One is simplicity. It's a single object. It's not two objects. Two is the editing of a feature line in plan view. You can edit the elevations of a feature line in plan view, right? You can't do that with an alignment and profile. And when it's more of a site grading type scenario, this concept really starts to come into play, where you build parking lot type corridors, or something similar to the screenshot I have there, with feature lines, because stationing really isn't a concept that we care about in a parking lot, right? We might have maybe a central road running through there. We could use an alignment for that, but when it comes to feature lines as a baseline in the corridor, that could be quite a bit simpler. So definitely encourage you guys to expand on this. Myself and my team here, we're going to be kind of pushing the limits with this feature, see how this kind of changes workflows for site design and site grading within Civil 3D. So the second element to this is corner cleanup, right? So many of you maybe have tried using corridors, and you might have gotten this on a curb return in an intersection, or if you even used it, tried to use it in a parking lot grading scenario, the corridor overlaps itself, and so you get bow ties was kind of the common term for it. You get bow ties on it, and what we can get now is the corridor has some intelligence there where it will clean itself up. So if you ever use grading tools and you've seen it kind of trim itself on an inside corner, we'll get a similar thing now with this corner cleanup for corridors. So just zooming on the screen there to what that looks like, that corner cleanup, you can see that right there, that will clean up. So I'll show you that live in the software as well. It's really a pretty cool feature. Feature line extraction from corridors. This has been improved. It was there in the past, but it was kind of crude. You'd pick one feature line and extract it, and then pick another one and extract it. Now we get an entire dialog box where once we pick a corridor, you get a whole dialog that allows you to check on or off or sort or filter or do all sorts of things with different feature lines. So this has all kinds of implications for perhaps extracting data for staking, or perhaps you're running an adjacent corridor on maybe both sides to your primary corridor. We can extract those feature lines a lot more quickly. And of course we have control on them being dynamic and all sorts of things like that. Here's another tool set being added to Civil 3D. This is something that's been kind of locked up. It's been accessible in the software, but not to end users. And this is property sets. It's something that actually has been around in AutoCAD architecture for quite some time, and they have now just opened it up for Civil 3D. What this means in a nutshell, it means custom properties, user-defined properties for any and all objects in your drawing. So that's AutoCAD objects or Civil 3D objects. So think of a block with attributes. You can have all sorts of attributes on a light block. It could be the type or the type of material or its application, right? All that kind of attribute data you can have attached to any and all objects in your drawing now. And what you can do with that, well, this is kind of the whole model concept kind of on steroids, right? We build surface models and corridor models for getting automatic sections and some automatic quantities and things like that. But what about the attribute data in there? It's a huge can of worms we're opening here. What can you attach to your objects, and how will you use that? I could go for an hour on just this topic, but there's all sorts of properties that we could use there. So pretty excited about that. And then along these same lines, the solids extraction from corridors, that's been there for a couple of years now. It was in a productivity pack for a little while, and it's now it's in their full-blown feature in the software. The solids can be dynamically linked to your corridor, and it'll automatically attach property set data to those solids. So think about the intelligence that's in your corridor just natively. You have codes. AutoCAD solid is a volume, right? We can attach a shape code to it. So we could be attaching tags automatically. It'll do it for us. We could attach the code and the sub-base code or the base code or the pave code, and these solids would push out with additional attribute data. This has all kinds of downstream benefits, be it quantifying in something like Navisworks, or if it's just pulling out the solids themselves, the visualization of solids is quite a bit better than the visualization of a corridor. So pushing into Navisworks, pushing into InfraWorks, a number of applications, and AutoCAD Solid is quite a bit more flexible, way more stable, and more universal than a corridor. So another new feature that's definitely pretty cool there. So let me jump into the software, and I want to show you a few of these new features. So the first one I want to show, I don't have time to show you all of them, but it's this Reference Styles Manager. And how this works is I've got a drawing right here, okay, just a basic design drawing. And if I go to the Manage tab, I now have a reference button here. And if I click this, I can go out and browse to a template. And so I'm going to go in here and grab a DWT file. It could be a DWG, doesn't matter. And if I hit Update, and I come over to my styles, let's go take a look as soon as that refreshes. If I go to my settings, and we're looking at profiles here, so let's go to my profile style. And in here I have these little icons that show up. So this is just to notify you that you have, that these are linked to a reference template. And let's go jump into my template now. So say I was over here and I'm managing, I'm creating some styles. So if I make a copy of this one, and we have a third version of this, for example, if I save this template and I come back to any of my project files, now this doesn't automatically push. The user still has to come here to the reference, and we have to tell it to update. I think I saved that template, and we should see that style called City Standard 3 show up in my project drawing now. Let's go into here to Profile Styles. No, I don't think I saved it. Let's go back here. So here's my template, Profile Styles. There's that third one. Let's save this. Let's come back here to the Manage tab. Do a refresh. Doesn't seem to be pushing. Give me 1 second, we'll get it figured out here. Let's try it again. Let's make another style in this template. So this is definitely not a feature that it doesn't work. Not a very cool feature. We'll get it working though. So I have a fourth standard in there. Let's see if we can get that to push appropriately. I'm going to reload that surface or that template. So I'm going to pull the reference template out just so you guys can see how it functions here. Once that's pulled away, you see those icons disappear. Now let's see if we can go reattach this template and bring this in. Let's run an update on this. See if it pushes our styles. I'm getting some hints from the audience here. Tell me I have to select the actual reference template within that dialog box. All right, if we don't get it on this one, I think we'll stop there. You know, you do this a dozen times, and then when you do in front of someone, it doesn't work. I promise you guys, this works. It's cool. Yeah, so go try it on your own. It's definitely there. It definitely works. I don't know why it's not pushing right now. Try one more time. Yeah. See, this usually says out of date, and it's telling you that something isn't loaded there. So I'm telling you, it's awesome. The other piece of it I was going to show you, see if we can get that to work, because this is kind of cool as well. Yeah, it's not pushing. You know what, I'm going to hold off on it. I'll just explain it to you guys. If I were to come in here and I was to take this style, for example, and this style is called City Standard, right? And this is one that's linked in the reference template. If I came in here and made changes to this, right? And if it's a referenced style, it's going to say, well, what do you want to do? This thing is referenced to a template, and you can't edit it. I can either make a local copy with a unique name or apply these edits just to this drawing session, meaning when I close the drawing, it disappears. So I've got one other tip for making it work, which is restart Civil 3D, right? When in doubt, restart Civil 3D. So that would probably do it, but take my word for it, it works. Try it out for yourself. I promise it works. So in the interest of time, we'll keep moving along though. Data shortcuts, data shortcuts for corridors, as well as data shortcut folders is something I want to show you here. So I've got a drawing with all kinds of objects in it. And if I come down here, and I'm just going to establish a data shortcut working folder, and make a new data shortcuts folder. We're not going to make an entire project folder here, but just a shortcuts folder. Then I'll associate this project to this drawing and save it. When I go and create data shortcuts, so for now you're going to see with the corridors, those are showing up down here. I've got corridors, so I can data shortcut my corridor now. When I create all those data shortcuts, this is what you guys are used to now. You know, if I look in my alignments, right, I've got 30 some alignments, right? That it gets to be quite a bit to organize and to keep track of, and to also make a data reference to. So what I can do now is create a folder, and I can call this, maybe it's phase 1, right? It's my phase 1 alignments. And I make a folder in here, and I can just grab any alignments I want now, and I can drag this stuff into that folder, and it shows up here. I can make subfolders. I can do all sorts of things. Okay. So if I go into a new drawing, I want to be bringing those alignments in here. If I go to those data shortcuts now, I see that folder. I can create a reference to that entire folder. I can also just press and drag on an entire folder or a single data shortcut, and all of those will come into this destination drawing. So the tedium that you're used to with data shortcuts and data references is certainly improved, especially with the creation of data references, meaning bringing it into your destination drawing. So zoom extends, all those alignments come in just like that. So nice improvements, nice new features there, certainly. Let's look at some of the corridor features. I want to show you building a corridor baseline on a feature line, and then also some of how this corner cleanup works. And it's a similar example as I had in the PowerPoint there, but I want to show you live so you can kind of see how it works. So if I pick on a corridor, I have Add Baseline up here. If I go ahead and click that, the change here is that I now have a feature line option. Before, it just automatically prompted you for an alignment and profile. Now I can select a feature line. Certainly I could sort by site, or I could just come out here and just pick it right in the drawing. So I can pick this feature line. Tells me that is curb and gutter 4. I can hit OK, and now that's a baseline in my corridor. I can then go right up here to add regions, and I can add a region right on that feature line. And we'll say that we're going to go from right here to right here, and then it prompts me for an assembly. So this workflow is mostly the same. Prompts me for an assembly, and I can go and pick a curb line, a curb only with a sidewalk assembly. So you guys see what I'm getting at here. This is parking lot type design with corridors, and there's a lot of crazy workflows out there that kind of make this happen, but it's a lot of workarounds in the actual editing of those baselines when they're profiles that you have to go and pan and zoom to, and you have to think in terms of stationing. You know, that's pretty tedious. When it comes to a feature line, we're going to skip the targeting here. We're just going to build the corridor region. When it comes to the feature line, it's simple, right? Because I can just pick on it and I can edit an elevation on it real simply. So here's the corner, and there's this one little catch to it. The initial build of it doesn't clean up the corners, but any kind of edit to any source data, what you're going to do, right? You're going to edit the feature line, you're going to edit the assembly, something like that, will result in a change to it. So if I push this to 1250.5, any change to the source data would affect that, and it would update accordingly. So that's a corridor now trimming itself on an inside corner. We've never had that, and that makes a big difference. Along with building a corridor on a feature line, it makes a huge difference for thinking about site grading, you know, more non-linear type designs with corridors. And corridors are what? We have so much more data in there compared to grading objects and feature lines. We have base material. We have all kinds of subgrade material there that we can use to make additional surfaces for all kinds of things, for labeling, for quantification, all sorts of things. The amount of intelligence and how dynamic a corridor is makes it quite a bit more powerful tool than grading objects and feature lines. And it kind of goes without saying, I don't have to tell you guys, if you've used grading tools, they're not exactly the most stable thing in the software. They've been buggy for years. There are some workflows that can keep them fairly stable, but you have to be pretty clean with grading tools to make them work. So corridors now for site grading. I wouldn't say all the little features are there to make it work, but I would say we're well on our way to being able to doing quite a bit more with corridors. So a question came in, what data did you change to get the corridor to update? And the answer is I just changed the feature line right here. So it's a source object. So what's the source of this baseline and region here? It's the feature line, and it's also the assembly. So on initial build it won't do it, but then any kind of update, you know, I could have also come up here, made a change to the assembly, and that would have kind of refreshed it. So there's a lot of kind of calculation that's going on there to force the corridor to do this. I mean, you can see that's actually inserting an assembly or a frequency line, that people often use that term, at an angle that's not perpendicular to my baseline. Corridors have never been able to do that before, so there's a lot of self-trimming going on there. And so if I take a look at, let's take a look at the surface, for example. I brought my feature line up there, so I've got a bulge in my parking lot, but let's take a closer look here. You should be able to see it there. There's my curb face, right? A nice sharp corner there. So, and another question, so the corridor cleanup, you know, around corners is automatic once it sees that it's a corner? Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it. Maybe it doesn't know yet that it's a corner. You'd think it would. I don't know. There's a lot of calculation going on in the background there, and it basically needs a little kick in the butt or a refresh to make that corner cleanup happen. So encourage you guys to play around with it. It's definitely a nice, cool feature. So just to recap some of the new features around project management, it's a surface caching, it's data shortcut folders, it's referencing multiple data shortcuts through that drag and drop option, and it's corridor data shortcuts. And then when you, probably after a Civil 3D restart, you have a styles reference manager that works as well. So feature lines without a site and pressure pipe content, a big improvement for usability of the software. Feature lines being pulled out of your corridor. You know, I missed that one. Let me show you that quick. Let me show you that dialog box. If I pick on the corridor and I do feature lines from corridor, so it's the same command as before, but now let's say I go pick a feature line here, I get a whole dialog box here, and I can choose all sorts of things, uncheck, check them. I can even tell it to join feature lines in adjacent regions. So this is curbs, for example, going between a straight road region and a curb return region. It'll join those feature lines. You have additional settings in here about keeping a dynamic link, the code set style to use to apply the feature line styles. I mean, the amount of data you can pull out of your corridor and have it be smart data, it's a big improvement with this new release. So a question came in, can we download and use 2017 now? Absolutely, it's out there, it's free. You guys can get the free trial on it. I encourage you to check it out. If you're on subscription, like most Autodesk customers, you already own 2017, so go check it out. I do want to emphasize though, know what you're doing. Don't just go and grab your project drawings and start migrating them, and that's because of this thing I pointed out right here. The versions are not backwards compatible of Civil 3D objects. They will not go backwards. Another question came in, new workflows around showing a construction limit line. Certainly they are. I don't quite have time to get into it today, but expect to see some more new webinars on you know, new workflows and new features, new ways of using Civil 3D with these new improvements. So just a couple other things before I close out here. The one other thing I didn't quite touch on, and it's the roundabout workflow, and I touched briefly on custom property sets, but this one was a little obscure, so I just kind of left it to the end here. Using Autodesk Vehicle Tracking the Autodesk Vehicle Tracking, you can make a roundabout object. This is not the one that's been in there since 2010 or 11. That one is actually gone now. This is a whole new tool for creating roundabouts. Frankly, it's the most powerful tool set in Civil 3D. If you're doing roundabouts, and this tool designs it, you know, the way you want. So certainly some caveats there. The new collaboration improvement is you can make a roundabout in InfraWorks. It's a really pretty cool tool in there. You can then link that InfraWorks model into Civil 3D, and it'll create an Autodesk Vehicle Tracking roundabout in Civil 3D. So very little data loss going from a conceptual design in InfraWorks to a more detailed design in Civil 3D. So with that, I will end it here. Thanks a lot for watching. Here's some of our contact info. As always, this stuff is posted onto our YouTube page. I encourage you guys to go check it out. We've got dozens and dozens of other videos up there. We're always putting new stuff up there. And one last question. Is there a productivity pack available for 2017? Not yet, but some of the 2016 productivity pack features are now native to 2017. That's kind of the process you see, is kind of beta and then productivity pack, and then if people really like it, it's in the full release. So some of those 16 productivity pack features are now native in 17. So thanks a lot for listening, everyone. Have a good day.